Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our press conference regarding a commercial burglary that occurred a few days ago. Sheriff's going to give you some information, show you some photos, and the sheriff will not be entertaining questions about any other topics today. So if you have anything that you need to speak with me about, I'll be happy to do that. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to the sheriff.
Thank you, Denise.
You're welcome.
Well, good afternoon, and for our media partners, thank you for showing up. I think most of you know that I'm Hernando County Sheriff Al Nienhuis. It's spelled Nienhuis, and it is pronounced Nienhuis. And before we get into the particulars of this case, obviously the case itself is a very interesting chain of events that occurred over the last week or so. But I think there's some overlying things that the public really needs to know as we go through the particulars of this case, that we really want to drive home 2 or 3 points that are extremely important for the success in this particular case. The first and probably the most important thing is you hear law enforcement say it over and over and over again, and in this case it certainly paid dividends, and that is, if you see something or you know something, please say something. This is a specific case where an anonymous citizen saw something that was a little suspicious, and it put into a chain of events that allowed us in several hours to be able to get back about 35 guns that were stolen. So that's the first point. The second one, and I think it's also important for the public to understand, that oftentimes these criminals, although they are not what we would consider smart to be able to do something like this, some of them have a little bit more intelligence than other criminals, and that intelligence is shown by the fact that once they get caught, they realize, particularly in this day and age, it is best to let law enforcement know everything you know about this case and maybe other cases to help make life a little bit better for you. Of course, we never promise them anything, but one thing I can promise is that if you don't cooperate with law enforcement, it will certainly not go well for you. And so that's in this particular case, we did have some cooperation early on by one or more of the individuals involved. And as I said, these guns were found and back in the custody of law enforcement in several hours. We can imagine how quickly they would have went through the criminal element and dispersed probably all over the Tampa Bay area, if not all over the state and maybe further, had my detectives and my patrol deputies not been working so diligently on that. So now to step back and talk a little bit about what actually happened is last Wednesday, about 7:30 in the morning, an individual called the sheriff's office and said that this person saw something that just didn't quite seem right. 3 juveniles, I think the person even mentioned that there might have been some guns involved, and they were downtown Brooksville, just a couple blocks west of Main Street on Broad, walking in the area. Of course, deputies responded, and over the time it takes to take the call and for deputies to get there, the juveniles weren't in that immediate area when the deputies arrived. So it took deputies probably about 45 minutes till about 8:15. And one of the things that the citizen mentioned was that they thought that one of the people looked familiar to them and gave us a name. So deputies started looking in the areas where that particular individual, who was not unknown to us, might be, and eventually found the person about a mile driving distance, probably about 2/3 of a mile as the crow flies, from where they were seen in downtown Brooksville. And they found at that location, which happened to be 513 Sharon Street, they found Jawarren Langley. Yep. Jawarren Langley, I'll talk more about him. Jawarren is actually a documented gang member. He's part of the KBM gang, which is Killin' Bout Mine gang, and we'll talk about what he was arrested for. They also found Devontae Smith, and he's a documented Piru blood gang member. He also apparently founded the KBM gang. He was at that location. And then last and certainly not least, we found Breon Sanders, who is also 15 years old, much like Jawarren Langley. Devontae Smith is 23 years old. During the course of trying to interview these individuals, one adult and two juveniles, we received a call about 15 minutes later, a little bit more than 15 minutes later, from a local business that it reported that that business had been broken into and several guns were stolen. Of course, we went to that business and started the investigation. Detectives were called out. We also, because this business was in this business of selling firearms, ATF was notified, and they came up and provided tremendous help, manpowered us going through this investigation and also helping the store owner do some inventory and so forth to find out exactly what was missing. And during you can see a map behind me of the 513 Sharon Street, where we initially ran into these individuals, and some of the other locations that we visited throughout the investigation. But what we found out was on Tuesday, the day previous, we had found some video from another business showing two of these individuals actually trying to buy face masks. That was about a little after 3 o'clock that previous day before the burglary occurred. Then about 20 minutes later, the individuals were actually seen in the victim business, casing that business and figuring out where the gun cases were and which guns were where and so forth. And that's them casing the business. Then about 1:20 a.m., we get a video from yet another business, local business, not the victim business, of these individuals walking in front of the victim business prior to making entry. So that was about 1:20 in the morning on Wednesday. The same morning we received the call, both for the suspicious individuals as well as the victim business being broken into. About 1:48, we have two black males who force entry into the business and proceed to smash the gun case. Now, interestingly enough, video shows that they exited at 1:51, so they went in at 1:48, they left in 1:51, so it went very, very quickly. And this is, again, a little bit of a timeline, but you can see what devastation they left in their wake. Detectives on Wednesday, we're going back to Wednesday now, detectives went to 528 Sharon Street. I'll go back here a couple to show you. Again, right in the same vicinity, about 10:15 a.m., and they come into contact with Evan Hampton. He's another individual. He's our fourth suspect. He's 17 years old. And through investigation, the deputies discovered that on Wednesday at 7:24 a.m., they had some video of individuals walking near 513 Sharon Street, where 3 firearms were later recovered. And I think we may have pictures of some of those. There's a couple firearms that were recovered, another one, and then last and certainly not least, that one there. So there were several firearms that were discovered fairly quickly, about 10:38. Hampton admitted to us that Sanders brought the guns over, and he provided the location of some additional firearms. 3 firearms were located in the woods near 528 Sharon Street, going back to that, again, right in that same area. And then they did an interview with Sanders, and he provided the location of 2 firearms, which was 715 Oakdale Avenue, which you can see there is also very, very close to that same location, but they're already starting to spread out a little bit. Both those firearms were recovered almost immediately. Wednesday again, about 2:50 in the afternoon, Langley is cooperating, and he identified a vehicle that contained some backpacks where some of the guns were stashed at 817 Peach Street. Now you can see that's in the southern end of Brooksville. A search warrant was executed at that location, and 27 firearms, as well as various ammunition, was found in the backpacks. On Wednesday afternoon, Langley, or evening actually, Langley, Smith, and Sanders were booked into the Hernando County Jail, followed a couple hours later by Hampton. So, let's see, that's our, and there's a picture of some of the guns and firearms, or ammunition. You've got them here. You can see the backpacks that were there. And again, this was a case where we actually started talking to the suspects, we're in the process of getting at least a couple of the guns acquired and seized, actually before the victim even knew that a burglary had occurred. So it was great work by the citizens who called in. It was great work by the deputies who were investigating initially this and knew their area, knew some of the people that we've had interaction with, as well as, of course, the detectives and ATF and everybody else who was involved. Now, I'll give you a little bit about what they were actually arrested for and charged with. Oh, there's another long guns there and a pistol and some more ammunition. We can make copies of this available to our media partners, obviously. And this is Devontae Smith. He was charged with burglary of a structure or a conveyance while armed. He has a $50,000 bond. Jawan Langley, he's charged with armed burglary of a structure or conveyance while armed and unlawful possession of a firearm, and he was turned over to DJJ, and it's my understanding he's still in custody there. Evan Hampton was charged with unlawful possession of a firearm and grand theft of over $300 but under $5,000, and he was also turned over to DJJ. And last and certainly not least is Breon Sanders, who was charged with unlawful possession of a firearm as well as grand theft over $300 but under $5,000, and he was turned over to DJJ. So those are our individuals. Again, a tremendous amount of work by my detectives that are standing on each side of me. I also want to definitely make sure that I go on record as saying that we appreciate the assistance, the speedy response of ATF, as well as their assistance in this investigation. I think everybody involved here will tell you that we have a great relationship with our federal partners here, all of our federal partners, but ATF, especially in this case, was very instrumental in providing manpower for this particular investigation, which, as it stands now, all of these charges on this particular investigation will be state charges, but we certainly appreciate any help we can get, and ATF was quick to respond. So I'll be happy to answer a couple questions on this if I can, we'll take those now.
What made the citizen say one of the suspects looked familiar? Was he on warrant? Was there a warrant out for his arrest, or what?
No, actually, I guess just I understand, and I haven't listened to the call myself, but I understand that this anonymous tipster basically said, hey, there's some young people in the area of downtown Brooksville. Looks like they may have guns, and one of them looks like, and he said, I may have heard the name, but I can't remember which one he specifically named, and it turned out to be that individual. So again, the deputies go, well, we know who that is. Let's see if we can track him down and figure out if he does have guns, if so, where he got them, and so forth. And that's kind of what started the ball rolling.
And how did they break into the business?
They actually they went through it was kind of a smash and grab type entry. So they went in very quickly.
How much gang activity is there in Hernando County?
Well, gang activity is kind of hard to define. Obviously, we have a couple people that were documented gang members. I think one thing that is really telling also is that you have one adult and 3 juveniles, which shows that this individual is trying to recruit those people into a life of crime. If you define gangs as like the Bloods or the Crips in California, not a tremendous amount of activity that is that well defined and that well structured. People getting together and committing crime, as occurred in this case, it happens fairly regularly. Sometimes they give themselves names. I would not say that there's any type of rank structure necessarily, other than maybe the person who's the oldest kind of sometimes is the de facto leader. And it really is the gambit in between there. We do have people sometimes that move in this area that we know that are documented gang members, and they try to recruit and so forth, and we obviously pay very, very close attention to that once we figure out that they're here and who they are. And as in this case, we work very, very hard to send a message that it won't be tolerated.
What were they going to do with the guns?
Go ahead, and then I'll come over.
Did the store operator do what should have been done to secure the store and secure, unfortunately, these items that are going to be
Right.
very
Well,
valuable?
I think a couple things, without going into a whole lot of detail, a couple things. Obviously, they were in the store for 3 minutes. It is my understanding, the initial reports I got is that there was obviously video, and there was an alarm system, and there may be some question that the owner of that business is dealing with the alarm company to find out if an activation occurred, and if it did, why it wasn't notified immediately. Because I will tell you, that's one. We get probably about, out of 1,000 burglar alarm calls we get, somewhere between 1 and 3 are legitimate. Not 1 in 300, but 1 in 3. So 997 out of 999, somewhere in there, are false alarms. There are a couple of them, gun stores being one of them, or a business that sells guns, is one that we would move up quickly to the priority list, particularly if that alarm company were to tell us that something specific like glass break or movement inside the business. We're still looking into that, but I don't know of anything that the owner, that I could say off the top of my head right now that the owner could have done differently. Obviously, hindsight's always 20/20.
You don't have to lock them up in a secondary sense.
That may be a question, not as far as we're concerned. I don't think there's any state law that's going to address that.
Sheriff, 35 weapons, just, how risky could this have been if you guys hadn't located these guys so fast? Years back, there were several gun stores that were being, victims of break-ins where those guns got dispersed, the Orlando area,
Right.
some people, were killed. Just how dangerous could this have been?
Well, to say it's dangerous is an understatement. I always tell the public, and again, that gets back to the citizens helping us, because it is very likely that one of these weapons could have been used to not just kill another gang member, which we don't want that to happen, but to kill an innocent adult, a police officer, or what really scares me to death is a young child, an innocent child getting, and we hear about all the time that these young people who don't understand the consequences of their actions get a hold of these guns, and a young child who did nothing to deserve what they got end up getting seriously injured and frequently killed by gunfire. So to say it's important to get these illegal guns off the street as quickly as we possibly could was an understatement. And again, we did have a little bit of luck involved. And as I said, the cooperation of the suspects helped move it along because they realized how much trouble they were actually in. And of course, what started it all was a citizen calling in and saying something, I see something that's not right, and maybe the citizen might have thought they were on their way to school to do a school shoot. We don't have any evidence of that, but that may have been what precipitated it. But again, in these neighborhoods, cooperation from the citizens is critically important. And I think the citizens need to understand that if criminals are willing to tell on another criminal, the citizens should definitely tell if they know something. So,
Did these suspects say, what they were planning to do with all of these weapons and that ammo?
no, I haven't heard specifically. I don't know if we have any specific information, but my guess is this is like cash to them, and I'm sure that they were if they hadn't planned that specifically, very quickly they would have thought, wow, we could really make some money off of this and win some favor with other criminals. Because these are hot commodities on the black market. So,
Have you been able to figure out what went wrong, what has gone wrong in these kids' lives?
that's a good question. You have 15-year-olds, and as I said, these are not individuals that are not known to us. Obviously, we know a couple of them at least are documented gang members, probably recruiting the other two to join in that gang. To give you some, Jawar and Langley, He's had a previous arrest for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and burglary, as well as other charges. He's 15. Here's a 17-year-old, Evan Hampton. The only thing we have on him, previous arrest, is a petty theft, a first-degree petty theft. So, again, fairly new to this probably. Here's another 15-year-old, Breon Sanders. Again, petty theft on him, first degree. But Devontae Smith, we have interfere with custody of a child, resisting arrest, contempt of court, and others, as well as being a documented gang member. So these people were not totally unknown to us. What leads them into that, whether it's something in their community or whatever, that they feel that maybe they just like the excitement. You like the excitement till law enforcement knocks on your door, and then you realize that you've made a huge mistake. And I think that's when sometimes they see the light and realize that I'm probably not going to be able to get out of this, so my best hope is being cooperative.
Are any of them in school?
That I would assume they're all in school. I don't know if they've been attending or not. Do we have any information on this?
None of them were in school.
We don't have that information, but
Sheriff, what did you say, KBM, the gang, what did that stand for, and is that a gang here in Hernando County?
it was founded, apparently, from what we're find out, it was founded by Devontae Smith. He apparently founded it, but he's apparently also a Piru blood gang member, but he founded KBM. And what KBM, this is your other juvenile who's involved, Jawarin Langley, and KBM stands for Killin' Bout Mine. KBM, Killin' Bout Mine. I don't know how many members they have. I would assume it's not a lot documented. I think it's a fairly small gang, but again, it's a group of people get together, start doing crimes, and say, hey, I think we need a name, and that's how it.
And killing about mine, so are they?
Yeah, obviously the word "killing" in there shows that they're not a choir group,
Is there a particular reason you chose to name them in this case? Often we see juveniles are not named in cases.
Well, and when you're talking about felonies, and you're talking about felonies this serious and this brazen, and the possible consequences, I certainly never have a problem naming them and showing their faces, because we want to send a message to those young people that might be thinking about getting involved in something that's glamorous like this. Realize that it's glamorous for a few seconds, and then you have years of not so glamorous to deal with. So.
What kind of penalties are they going to face if you know that?
Well, again, it's going to be they're going to be is it second or third degree felonies? So they're going to have some serious time. Obviously, one of them has a $50,000 bond. Devontae, let me go back and. 5,000. They're juveniles. They don't have bonds. They're a DJJ, but he has a $50,000 bond, so it's pretty serious. I'm sure the judges, because of the brazenness of this crime, I am told that the state attorney or prosecutors are seriously considering charging all of these as adults. We would certainly be in favor of that, because again, we want to send a message that if you're going to be involved in this type of activity, you're going to have to, if you're going to act like an adult as far as a criminal goes, you're going to have to be treated like one. So, okay. Thank you all very much. Again, I want to send kudos out to not just my detectives who worked around the clock, but to my deputies who took the initial call, and especially to those citizens that are cooperative with us, because they probably saved some lives of some innocent people in cooperating with us. So thank you all very much for coming. Have a great afternoon. Gentlemen, thank you, by the way. Good job. And really good job. You guys kicked some butt. Good job. Good job. Yes. Looking strong. Good job.